Welcome to today's Peace Vigil program. We are going to be talking to Dr. Jagmohan Singh ji, who is the nephew of Shaheed Bhagat Singh. Our topic today is the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. As you know, on 13th April 1919, over 1,200 people were killed and hundreds injured in Amritsar, and this is known as the Amritsar massacre or the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. And we're going to be looking at why this took place, because many people know what happened on that day, but we're going to be looking at why this happened and what lessons we can learn. So, Jagmohan Singh ji, first of all, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you to Peace Vigil for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Dr. Singh, in the last some months, you have been telling us stories from our independence movement. And today, on the anniversary of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, I would like to ask you, what are the things we need to know about this tragedy, its background?
Thank you. I think the most important part about this is that it developed into Jallianwala Bagh. But what was really happening before that, which made them, that was the question which I worked upon, that Michael O'Dwyer, the governor, and the General Dyer, both claim to be very efficient bureaucrats of British imperialism. But what made them go so mad that you blindly kill people and make a statement that if I've only finished when my ammunition was well finished, or I could not bring the bigger cannon inside because the place entering into that was very small. So what made that? So to really understand the reaction to by that British imperialism or any government, it is very important to understand. I will just draw your attention that post First World War, because definitely there was our big leaders also try to help and thought that it may be that if we help them, now they are in problem, they will come back and give us some more freedoms. Instead of giving freedoms, they brought out a Rowlett report. The Rowlett committee was under Mr. Rowlett, and he actually had a very detailed working of the revolutionary movement in that, because following the other party, which has 8,000 people have come from America, Canada, and Southeast Asia to liberate India, there were other activities, and that virtually the Rowlett Committee report virtually became the next point for revolutionary to learn, because which they didn't knew was there, and they banned itself. Their own report was banned as a availability in India. Anyway, so that
Dr.
was
Singh,
happening.
Dr. Singh, just for a second, I just want to tell our viewers, in case they need reminding, that the Rowlett Act was basically a law by which political prisoners could be tried without a due process of law. Am I right?
Yeah, that is actually it was that they can arrest anybody.
They can, okay.
Without giving reason. And then there is no appeal, no dalil, no vakil. That became the slogan.
Okay. Okay.
That was the worst kind of law which was being made, that where it was being expected they would give more political powers. They were even withdrawing the basic rights of the citizens.
Yes.
So that, but the base was the Rowlett report.
Yeah. Thank you.
Rowlett Act was drawn out of that. There is so much political revolutionary activities taking place that they need a special law to suppress them. And that was also following, because prior to that, there was Defense of India rule, which had the same powers.
Same power.
But with the end of the First World War, it is coming to an end. So they could not sustain, there was no reason to sustain Defense of India Act. But they brought this Rowlett Act in that.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind the viewers.
Yeah, that is right. They must understand it. And the second important part was that on the other side, the national movement understood that the unity is very important for fighting against the British imperialism. And it was in 1916 that the Congress took place. And the president of that Congress was Annie Besant, the India Home Rule, and she was very popular at that time in whole India. That's the time when Gandhiji is just entering the politics. And they joined with the Lokmanya Tilak to form a Lucknow Pact, which was the unification of all the forces, particularly Hindu, Muslim. So that unity was being built as an alternative or further pushing for rights of for freedom. And that was also a kind of nervousness in the British imperialism that this unity forces are coming. So that was the background in which Gandhiji gave a call that we must have a hartal, and that was first to be held in the last Sunday of the March 1919. But it was postponed because there was not preparedness, particularly in Punjab. It did happen in Delhi, but it was postponed to the next week on 6th of April because there was no preparedness for it. And one of the cause of that non-preparedness was that because of the First World War, there was a lot of economic stress into which the people were suffering. They didn't have sufficient to eat. They didn't have sufficient economic power. And at the same time, there were 70,000 people who had been sacrificed, and most of them from Punjab.
Dr. Singh, do you mean in the army? Is that what you mean? Okay.
From the army in the First World War, because Punjab was also the garrison state of British imperialism. The maximum contribution, and that is what Michael Dwyer was claiming, that he has been the most efficient to serve the British Empire by giving them the maximum number of, but 70,000 of them were also discharged from army because they were not needed. So, wo kehte laam toot gayi. So that means they were sent back into homes. So that was one environment, and the leaders were worried that how do we ask people to go for hartal when they don't have the food to eat. And the solution to that was that either we go to the DC and ask him to use his Defense of India rule for making fair price shops so that food is available at a cheaper rate. But then there was a strong view that why don't we have our own common kitchen system? Why we are wanting them to solve our problem? This is our community problem. And this happened not only in Amritsar, but it is also happening in Lahore also. These are the two big cities where actually the focus of that hartal was. And this one action of establishing common kitchen in every mahalla and inviting people, and the 2 times meal were being served. So there was a charismatic effect of that people virtually forget about religious division as well as of caste division. So that was and that is why General Dyer tells his son, he was not invited to take over. He himself came by imposing a duty because in March 1919, he was on holidays with his family and he was walking around in Delhi and he was visiting all 1857 memorials. And he was also instructor of history to the army training. So to him, it looked like that whatever he has been reading in history, which was actually in 1904, G.W. Forrester, one of the British historians who had access to all original records in Allahabad, came out with a conclusion, it's a very interesting conclusion, that 1857, our administrator as well as historian have come to one conclusion, that if people rise above their political, this religious division, as well as from caste division, and they join together, then it is end of the British rule. So Forrester was also in their mind, because he was a teacher of history of 1857 to his units instructor. He was instructor for that. So that was hunting, because this unity, which was established by common kitchen, virtually was which started hunting them. And the most important event which took place was on 9th of April 1919. It was a Ramnavami, and Ramnavami was jointly celebrated. The procession was led by Dr. Bashir, who was a very popular medical doctor. And well, there was that earlier there used to be division of water. They will cry, this is a Hindu water, this is a Muslim water. But this is first time that there was all common water services. There was no distinction between the caste and religion. And the procession is being led by a popular medical doctor, Dr. Bashir. So this actually further added to their panic.
So just to give our English speakers a little bit of the meaning of hartal, it means that you stop work, right? Basically, you
Yeah,
don't
for
work.
one day, everybody stops and everything.
Yeah. So it's
They will come
organized.
and
Yeah. Yeah. So okay, yes, a session of work. So in Punjab, they say that because people are already so in, they are struggling. Because of the end of the First World War, there's no food and all. So what they say is we are going to have these common kitchens, which in Sikhism is langar, in which people of all religions and castes, they come and they eat together. And the British are scared of that, because that's another way that the people can get united. So I just want to give that context. And then Dr. Bashir, I want to just point out, is a Muslim doctor in Amritsar, who is leading the procession of Ram Navami, which is a Hindu festival. And in this Ram Navami, the barrier of having water for two different communities, Hindu and Muslim, has been broken, and everyone's drinking the same water. Yeah, okay. All right.
So this was the background. And the top leader who were organizing this strike, one-day strike, were Dr. Satpal. Well, he was a medical doctor, and Dr. Saifuddin Kichlu, who was basically from Kashmir, but there was a lot of settlement of Kashmiris in Amritsar because of the woolen industry. Most of them were working, and he was a lawyer. Actually, he did his PhD of law from German. So these two leaders were actually, they were also representing that unity of the communities going together for the cause, and also Malfar, and they were immediately arrested after Ramnavami. And the next day, on the 10th of April 1919, there was a peaceful procession. People marched towards the residence of or office of the DC, which was another part of it, to pressurize that these two leaders should be left. They should be, because they were being sent out of Punjab as exiled. So that was operation of Rowlatt Act, in a way, that you just arrest without telling the reason, and then well, just take them away from the public. So on that 10th of April, there was a firing on that peaceful procession. And there is a record that when the procession, people were gathering around there, they didn't even touch any Britisher. They didn't have any malice against any Britisher. The same people were roaming around on their duty. But as soon as they killed 20 people on that day and injured a lot of people, and there was a eyewitness record of that by one journalist, K.D. Malviya, came from all the way from Allahabad. and has a record of his witness of that, that how he find that some people are having injury on their leg and they are not being provided medical facilities. So this engaged and enraged the people. So they came to the city hall and they found that some of the British banks were open. So they just wanted to tell them to close the banks. There was nothing like looting or other. But one of the manager adventured to pull out his revolver and killed one of the person who were actually volunteering to tell him to close it, because there is so much of repression on us. How could you keep yourself open? And the most interesting part which took place was that the next man was with a bamboo stick with him, we call lathi. So he just hit the manager with that lathi and killed him. So that was a further scare that lathi is a very dangerous tool in the hand of a common man. So immediately the martial law was announced, that all rights were suspended. Then in the meantime, there happened that some, because this enraged masses which have been split from there, who have seen that kind of, so they did act wrongly against one of the British lady, and who saved Sherwood was also a Hindu family. That is the part which is not, and they made it a big story. So that become the, so this background of unity of the people, celebrating their religious functions together and rising above that division of religion and the casteism also, because that is also another point, that the casteism also was not visible there. People were mingling, and the same thing was happening in Lahore also. Lahore, there was a meeting held in the Shahi Masjid. And as soon as the people came out, the first person, young man, who about whom Bhagat Singh later wrote, because he was one of the orphan which was brought up in our family, and Bhagat Singh personally knew Khushi Ram. So he wrote that first martyr of martial law, Khushi Ram. He had, and there is a witness by Dr. Gopichand Bhargav, who was a medical doctor, later on became the Chief Minister of Punjab also, that there were 10 bullets on his chest. So that happened in Lahore also. But that enraged the people, and for a peaceful communication, then they were collecting at on the Vaisakhi day. And another thing which happened is that Amritsar is a central place for, they call the biggest Asian animal market is there. And on Vaisakhi, there used to be Mela. They stopped the Mela and also stop the people from going outside the city. So these are the two orders which are there, that you have stopped their work, they are free, and you don't want them, allow them to go back to their villages also. So that was another, that they were virtually, and because there was a peaceful meeting going to be held in Jallianwala Bagh. Jallianwala Bagh is a private property of some people who had their ancestors' memorial there. But it was an open space, so people, but it has a very narrow entry point into it.
So before Baisakhi Day on the 13th, on the 10th, there has already been violence. And as you said, 20 people have been killed of different religions.
The next point was that on 11th, they wanted the cremation. And peacefully cremation takes place. But the order is that up to 1:30, you have to finish it. After that, there is going to be a curfew and anybody on the road can be killed. So instead of doing that, people actually commonly went to bury the Muslim, because this is also a mixed up killing. It is not of one community, but both the communities are there. And the people had a peaceful cremation, as well as of burying of the bodies. But they were in a hurry also because there was panic being creating that if you miss that day, now, well, that was further agonizing. You catch hold of the leaders, take them away from Punjab, and this was later on that even Gandhi was not allowed to enter Punjab. It was later on when he came to know about it, maybe after 1.5 months, actually Gandhi came to know what is happening in, because all communications were also closed. So and then without proclaiming martial law, they applied martial law from backdate. After the massacre of Jallianwala Bagh, they didn't allow people to have even medical access because immediately curfew is there. In the night, there is nobody to attend there. And we have some ladies who were just married and their husband were dead there. There were children who were killed there. So this number they try to manipulate because the number which is being put up now is only for those who claimed compensation for the death. This 371 number, which is now being floated by and it has been floating at that time, was only because people even didn't dare to go and claim because everybody was being arrested and being under martial law, lot of statements there. So this is the foreground which we must understand. The lesson is that when people unite, it is the biggest threat to the ruler class, whoever may be. India, if it is our own or it is there. So these two unity position and the divisive forces, and divisive forces is the tool of the ruler. So that's the first lesson to be learned from that. And this lesson was learned by Bhagat Singh when he started his youth movement in 1924. Another interesting point to be made is that after that, Congress made a committee to go. This was not the end of it. The Jallianwala Bagh was not the end of it. Then the martial law started. And one of the vindictive was that because most of that was being led by the lawyers, because they understood the law and its bad effect on that. So they will put one Muslim lawyer and a Hindu lawyer, will tie them together and make them walk in a procession in the bazaars everywhere in India, Punjab. So that was the martial law. And one very funny thing happened that there is a Gujarat is one district. Now it's in Pakistan. So order goes to the DC of Gujarat that you apply martial law because condition is very bad. And his letter is there on record. He say you may be mistaken. That may be other Gujarat, which is the Gujarat state now. He said my Gujarat is very peaceful. There is no problem. But they said no, it is your Gujarat and martial law is to be imposed over there. And that martial law period is in which Gandhi ji actually was the writer of that Congress report of the martial law. He spent about 1 month walking and really trying to find out what really happened. And Sarojini Naidu actually in London said that they didn't spare our women. And that was because the Congress committee, lot of women who are of working class, they were virtually put to be naked and teased with that. And they came forward within the Congress report and the Mahatma Ji writes that all the witnesses has been re-verified. It is not that just we are recording for it, but we have re-verified that whatever is being recorded in the Congress report is the truth. And that also shook Gandhiji that because following that in Kasur, this is one of the Baba Bulle Shah's place, they put the scaffold even to hang the young men. And there was two young men of 14 years who were hanged in a public hanging. They have a flogging, public flogging. They will catch hold of a man and do that. And because the aeroplane was first time used in First World War, the second time it was used in Punjab. Gujranwala is another township. They bombed on the marriage party which was moving to the city. And then when that question was later on asked, he said that I thought it is a rioting going to take place. So and there was schools who were bombed. So this all was following. Well, before Jallianwala Bagh, there was a unity, and post Jallianwala Bagh was that is fear psyche should be created. And that is why when this report from the niece of Rabindranath Tagore went to him by personal letter, he immediately resigned his that decoration of Sir.
Yes, renouncing of the knighthood.
And that's a very powerful letter which he writes, that I cannot be witness to such a, and that is what Gandhiji later on also in case of Bhagat Singh's tribunal, he writes that very that this is your martial law mentality, that you just want not the normal things to open, because in martial law also special courts were set up and people were without being properly tried were being punished for life sentences. Even Dr. Bashir, who led that peaceful procession, was virtually ordered to be hanged. It was later on that they themselves felt scared of it. So this is one part of it. The second part is that when there was one journalist, he was a Britisher, but a very freedom lover, Hahnemann. Hahnemann was the editor of Bombay Chronicle. He actually had the first report from his correspondent from Punjab about what happened in the Jallianwala Bagh. And this was another very interesting thing. Now we find that for 3 months, they didn't allow this news to go out of Punjab. It was only Hahnemann or the Tribune. Well, his editor was also then punished. Then the correspondence of Hahnemann was given imprisonment, and he was sent back to England. But when he went back, he wrote one book, Amritsar and Our Duty. But nobody was able to believe him because they thought that these are like we call the conspirator. He is just making exaggeration. It is not there. They were trying to suppress the information.
Actually,
but finally,
Dr. Singh, I also have read somewhere that the Associated Press had given a statement the day after, so on the 14th. They released a press statement saying that the Indian crowd in Amritsar had attacked the authorities, and therefore they opened fire. And I think the number they had given were 200 Indian people dead. And I think that went to Britain and to other parts of the world. So that was already a big lie. Plus, to say that, so the number is wrong, but also that the Indian crowd attacked.
Because that is what brought Bhagat Singh to really verify at the age of 12. Because the same story was being said by one of his uncle who was pro-British. Because that was the whole British story, which happens now also, that they will immediately deny it and put the blame on the others. Whereas it was later on that it proved that it was not that thing.
Well,
and that is why
today at least we have social media and people have cell phones and all. So, the news spreads faster. People can capture things and they can send it across. But in those days, you were completely relying on
telegrams.
Yes, telegram.
But I think, the whole pro-British period was having the same one. Now that will astonish us that top Punjabi writer, Bhai Veer Singh, is sitting there. But he is a part of that pro-British Sikh community. So he doesn't talk even a single word about it. Instead, the Sarbra, that is the in charge of the Golden Temple, invites General Dyer and honors him, saying that you are the great server of the British Empire, because Sikh have a responsibility to serve the British Empire. And we want to announce you to be a honorable Sikh. He said there is a problem. I'm a chain smoker. He said that there is a problem. I cannot become Sikh because you say in Sikhism that smoking is prohibited. But I am a chain smoker. They say, okay, we will make a concession for you that you try to reduce 5 or 10 cigarettes per year, but we will make you a Sikh. This is on record. So the media, instead of media, it was kanafusi, that people will talk and their agents will, which is now being used also, that you just spread the word by mouth. Their agents will be spreading that information. So what the Associated Press is saying is what the version of the state at that time was. But there is interesting how it got exposed. That's the interesting part of another part of the story. That the Mr. C.R. Das comes all the way from Calcutta to Amritsar on his own car and brings 2 stenos with him. And on the way, he brings Motilal Nehru also. One was that they will have that Congress commission going into these atrocities, because it was post Jallianwala Bagh atrocities which were more important, and they are sometimes left out. That how they were acting with a punishment to the Indian people, the way those things were there. So that the Congress report really came up with a very good, but that was Congress report. So, but at the same time, the pressure started building up on the British, and they came up with the Hunter Commission. There were 2 Indian lawyers also who were taken as the members. And that is why Hunter Commission is having minority report as well as majority report. That Indian members didn't agree with that. But one of the very important things which happened, which changed the whole process and how those senior leaders worked. One was that one of the scientists, well, he was a secret visitor to these Indian members. And C.R. Das will, through him, will send the question to them, what questions they have to ask in the Hunter about, they will knew which witness will be coming and what questions are to be asked, because they were top liars. C.R. Das was one of the top liars. Motilal Nehru was a top liar. So this Professor Ruchiram Sani will secretly go and visit them, and they will ask those questions. And these 2 stenos of which Mr. C.R. Das brought, they will sit in the commission listening and making the notes, because they were fast note taker. And by 5 p.m., when the commission was just finished, the typed report will be available to Mr. C.R. Das, so that he will prepare for the next day. So they were actually giving them quite tough time, even within that one.
Dr. Singh, I just want to mention here for our viewers that one of the people in the Hunter Commission, one of the members, was Teesta Setalwad's grandfather, Chimanlal Setalwad. And today his granddaughter is also fighting for communal harmony in India, and she herself is also a lawyer. So it's good to remember that.
Yeah, it is very important. She carries that legacy of Setalwad. So, but one of the important thing happened is when Dyer appeared there, he had no what you call even a remorse kind of feeling that he has done wrong. He was so proudly putting it that this was the duty which I have to perform because they were about to revolt. And this is very interesting that about that revolt, there is in House of Commons, Churchill said that this is a foolishness. We are much more powerful now. No revolt can take place. They are just having a fantasy. So even their own, but this was being emphasized, and Dyer really committed. He said that this was my duty, and when he was asked by the lawyers, that the members of the board, that Hunter Commission, they said that what would you have done if that gun could have, uh, cannon could have been brought in? He said that I would have fully used it because to me, the battlefield of Paris or Amritsar has no difference because they're all enemies and the army is to kill the enemies. So when he made that type of statements, it was by the evening, Mr. C.R. Das said that now our task is made easier because it is from the horse's mouth that he is committing that he has done it, intentionally done it, and done it to really finish the people. If they've survived, it is because of their own resilience, but otherwise nobody was to be spared. And he telegraphed that whole statement of Dyer to London by spending 1,500 rupees at that time, which may be now in lakhs. if we, but that was that how the whole story was broken up, and then people have no defense about it. Because so far they were saying, no, people are just, Hanuman was not being listened. A journalist who was telling the true story was not being listened, or and even Dyer and Dwyer.
Yeah.
So then the whole recoil of that took place.
So,
So I
Dr.
think
Singh, one or two things that I want to now mention at this point is that we see a lot of parallels even today, especially things like, so I want to bring our viewers back to the incident about Miss Sherwood that you touched upon, is that there were these two women who were assaulted just before the 13th in Amritsar, and that the British administration used it as an excuse to come down heavily on the entire Indian population. So they said, oh, the British women are being assaulted. And so we are, I think they made a lot of men crawl on the streets
yes,
of
exactly
Amritsar.
that street was used, and that also became one of the inhuman treatment
Yes.
as a question.
Yeah, and there was no trial or anything. People were just picked up and told to crawl on the street. So what I'm trying to say is that often, even now in fascist governments, and we are seeing that in India, we also saw that in Germany, is that there will be an excuse used by putting women in this position. So obviously the assault is wrong, and the whoever did it should be punished. Rather than punishing the perpetrators, you start blaming an entire community, which is today happening in India with regards to Muslims, as we can tell. So one is that but by the way, I just want to mention again that you said that the Miss Sherwood was actually then given refuge by a Hindu family. A Hindu family protected her when she was being assaulted. So that is good to remember. The second thing I want to mention here, Dr. Singh, is that we are seeing throughout this history a huge role being played by doctors and lawyers. So highly educated people who are coming out and using their resources, using also their education to bring people together and stand for the rights of many people who are socially and economically in a much poorer situation than them. And we are seeing that in India as well. A lot of the doctors and lawyers have stood up against the fascist regime right now. So that's a hopeful sign, I think. Many times people say, oh, people who are upper class or educated, they don't care, but that is not true. I think it depends on the person. Even in South Africa, we see that people like Mandela, people like Winnie Mandela, who was herself a nurse, a lot of these people who were lawyers, doctors, nurses, they came out and defended the rights of their country.
I think you're right. It is basically the higher echelon who is consciousness, and they rise. And that is why on Gandhi's call, all these liars who left their courts, it was because otherwise they have a lucrative well, their professional income, but they left it. But that is a level of consciousness which the movement brings. And there is a constant struggle between the system making them selfish and people coming out with the society and understanding that their protection is with the society's interest and their interest matches. So that is the two divisions which definitely takes. But another point which I want to register is that the very first martial law order was that close this common kitchen. That means they understood that it is common kitchen which is making people free from their prejudices. They're sitting together, sharing the same. The second was that lathi, which was just everybody in this Amritsar area keeps in his hand. That is a kind of style with them. So they were withdrawn. People's cycle were confiscated so that mobility is not available. So all kind of that total story, if we see, then we know, as you rightly said, what is the response of the system to people's, that instead of addressing their problems, they better try to suppress the and they don't want any kind of criticism which comes. But still, British being back in London, there could be more debate on it. So that is why that finally clemency was announced, and many of people were finally relieved of their that illegal punishment, because these martial law courts were virtually, which was applied later to Bhagat Singh case also, that you bring, and that is why Mahatma Gandhi say this is your martial law mentality, that you don't want to try people in a proper way, though British claims that they are the most legal, perfect legal system, but when it applies to India, you don't follow that.
So, Dr.
So
Singh,
that
we clearly see in the run up to the massacre that the British are really scared of the unity of people across religious lines and caste lines. And we must remember that before that, Hindu Mahasabha and Muslim League have already been formed. And, they are already dividing the society, whereas the national movement is bringing people together. And the British are very scared of that. So one thing is that, so I would like you to address that a bit in today's context. The second question I would like to ask you is that when a power gets scared, so in this case, we are talking of the British, but in today's context, when people in power, they get scared, they do come down heavily on protesters, but also in general on the public, which can be quite violent. So what are the ways that one can prepare for that and combat that? Because obviously we don't support violence, but there's violence being committed, and how can people organize so that they can still resist? So those are my two questions.
Yeah, I think the first question is that definitely people have to unite and rise, because religion and caste has been the old system which keeps the people divided. But their common problem is the same. if there is a rise of prices, if there is all kind of excess taxation which is taking place. So that is a common ground. And until people understand that the system is causing that problem, which was really addressed by Bhagat Singh in 1924, I think the best conclusion drawn out of it was the building of a national Naujawan movement or the youth movement. And he said that the basic question is that at least these type of the forces which are being supported by the ruling class of communalism and casteism, at least it should be the youth must free himself from that. They must understand that there is a humanistic approach and that needs us, and that will be won by sitting together. And it is interesting, in 1924, when youth movement was built, its inauguration was done by Dr. Saifuddin Kichlu by starting a common kitchen. So that is one, is that we should share our problems, and religion is not a problem. Religion gives you your own environment content within your own area, but it is not to be in conflict. And that is where Bhagat Singh again addressed, and I think we need to reiterate that when he says that this question of religion in the national movement is there, there's one article, he quotes Leo Tolstoy. He says that Leo Tolstoy says that there are three layers in a religious thinking. One is the philosophy, which doesn't bother most of the people and they don't quarrel on the philosophy part of it. There is a humanism, that every religion is basically a community building, and no religion says that you hatred. Hatred is something like they say there are 5 vices which one should liberate itself. That is, so, so he said that that commonality is one part, and we have to understand that. The only problem is when ritualism comes. When somebody thinks that standing against the mosque, he will talk something to irritate them. So that is the ritualism. So that is also the game of those people who want to play, and that is so first of all is.
But Dr. Singh, here I would like to point out what you mentioned earlier, that the Golden Temple, the people who were in charge, wanted to make General Dyer an honorary Sikh, and they honored him in the Gurdwara and so on. So I guess my point, we need to remember this, that while we are looking at the human values that a religion like Sikhism or any other religion in the world promotes, and while we protect it through things like, say, the langar, where people are coming together, we also have to be careful that people who maintain their power through religious institutions will often side with the oppressor.
The state, exactly.
Yeah.
And another very interesting episode of it, that is how people actually taught them a lesson to that person. They gathered 50 Dalits, 500 Dalits, baptized them in Jallianwala Bagh, interestingly. And they were announced as new Sikhs. And they took them to Darbar Sahib. But these people, not only they were pro establishment, but they were also anti-caste. They would not receive their offerings. They will not bless them. So this was the contradiction which was used by the patriotic people. I know that.
You mean they were pro-caste? They supported the caste.
Yeah, they were pro-caste, and all those feudal values, which was being helpful to the British system, and which is now also. The casteism still more is within those very classes which are part of the exploitative arrangement of the state.
And actually, we see this throughout history. For instance, there was in the case of Aurangzeb, even though he was a cruel ruler, the many Brahmins got together and said they were writing a new Ved in praise of him, where he was declared one of the saviors and so on. So I don't think that these people really care.
No, no, but
Yeah.
the point which you are making is that we have to be aware of this history. That religiosity is not far, but they try to make their own constituency. They try to emotionalize people, and they also try to keep people illiterate. They will not allow you to read the scriptures yourself. They say, you pay us and we will do it for you. So that degeneration also takes place along with this one.
True. And Dr. Singh, what about the question about the state reacting with violence because they are now scared?
I think Bhagat Singh has a very interesting formulation of that. He say, dange kyun hote hain? Why these criminal riots take place? Why? Or दूसरा उनका है कि why the state makes kind of there is conspiracy. The conspiracy theory by the state. He say when state is not able to address the problems of the people, and virtually they have exhausted themselves, they don't want to address that, they come up with this repression. So repression is a natural confession of the failure of the state in performing its duty. And then they think that
this is great. This is great. So the repression is a confession of the state that it has failed.
That they have failed. Exactly.
Amazing. Yeah.
And the second part is that they think that they have the total power of the violence, state violence. If somebody reacts to it in the same way, they immediately put that he is doing violence. They forget about that there may be, all people are not that conscious raised that they can go for Malay. And that is why I think that Bhagat Singh even says that the mass movements have to be non-violent. He says that our history tells us that violence has not given us success. It will be by educating the people, by meeting or exposing the argument of the state by which they are repressing, that we succeed. Bhagat Singh is very clear on that. It is unfortunate that there are some events, as he said that in the beginning, I had to take that, but that was not the way to go ahead.
Sure.
So that way the state will always be there, and people have to come out with more of fearlessness.
Which will only happen when there is enough consciousness, number one, and exactly. Also there is organizing. So organizing is very important.
That gives you the strength. That gives the organization gives you the strength.
True.
Individually you are frustrated, and one has to understand the process. Now we find that Bhagat Singh and his comrades never ever show any kind of frustration or using, because abusive language is a part of that, that you are frustrated, is a language of a frustration. So that way, I think we learn from this, that we have to be united. And the common cause is the well-being of the society. Like Bhagat Singh said, that the biggest problem which the British regime or the British imperialism has caused is inequality. So our problem is to address the inequality. And when we achieve it, we will be achieving equality, and equality doesn't come without brotherhood. So brotherhood and equality are complementary to each other. One cannot exist without the other one.
True. So Dr. Singh, I'd like to close the program by asking you, please, by requesting you, please, to give a message today on the anniversary of Jallianwala Bagh massacre. I know that a few years ago you were awarded by the families of the victims of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre for doing work, for continuing the work of Shahid Bhagat Singh and other martyrs of our freedom movement. What is perhaps maybe one thing or a few things that we must remember today on the anniversary, which makes us stronger to fight for justice in India and abroad?
I think that is which we really conclude is that martyrdom and the post-martyrdom and pre-martyrdom events teach us that it is the unity of the people for justice, for equality and liberty that goes together. So we have to understand that and unite ourselves. Rise above those divisive things which are introduced by the system, exploitative system. And the last words which I remember is Bhagat Singh when defined that what is imperialism. His definition is he says that imperialism is a exploitation of one country by the other country. Now is the countries are represented by the corporates. So it is the corporate which is trying to exploit the countries. And we see every day those examples coming before us. But he said that force is not alone. It creates a divisive force within the society also. That is exploitation of man by man within the society and exploitation of resources by other countries, they go together. So we have to understand that the things which are happening, and particularly in this new liberalism so-called, and the type of repression which follows, because that is the design in it, that repress the people, keep the people uneducated, so that they are not able to understand the logic of the system. But Bhagat Singh, I think that is which is now we have to understood that when we are reaching 100th year of Bhagat Singh's Naujawan movement or youth movement, I think that is which is the task. And that way, that Bhagat Singh said, the peace will be established when the repression and social injustice is stopped. And we really work for the peace of the green fields, not of the peace of the graves. So I think we learn from that people do sacrifice, but they've sacrificed for a long-term peace and prosperity and equality and those values to be established.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. I'm sure that listening to this program on the anniversary of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre will help people understand the context and also learn lessons that will make the movement for justice and peace stronger in India and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you.